Should recent graduates be learning coding, AI tools, or computational design to future proof their careers?
Yeah, so you don't need to really make a checklist and be like, haha, ये सब मैं करूँगा तो my career is future proof, and then I can adapt to every possible scenario. While I do completely understand the place that you're coming from, I totally get it, the nervousness. But I've seen a lot more people, just follow their curiosity and let that be a more of a guiding mechanism, and to explore new tools. As you work with different projects come up with different requirements that makes you work with individuals that are coming from different varied fields, and that's how you also learn a lot, just by working with them, working with the new projects. So you don't necessarily need to sit down and do a separate class and be like, abhi I know everything about coding or like computation. I think just let your creative journey take the lead there, and I guess, just follow what you feel curious about. If you feel curious about coding, go for it, but don't do it in a sense that, okay, you have to future proof your career in a way.
You know what? I agree with what you're saying because I feel what is at the center of this question is a lot of fear. Like, I personally feel the word future proof comes with a lot of fear, and it comes with a fear of uncertainty. And let me tell you, there is no amount of future proofing you can do because the future is not something that has happened yet. And the future will always surprise you. And it's never going to be what you thought it's going to be. And there are always going to be things out of your control. And there is always going to be this one thing that happened that would entirely derail your quote unquote plan. Not that I'm against planning, but I feel this question is deeply rooted in fear. And it goes back to the first question that we began with, or my first observation that we began with, which was about job prospects. And like I said, and like you said, follow curiosity, follow beauty, follow the yearning to learn, as opposed to, let's say, oh my God, I need to do this, otherwise I won't get a job, because that is only going to get you so far. So, how can recent graduates balance creative integrity with commercial realities of the industry? I mean, I have one perspective to offer on this.
Go for it.
Um, so, what ended up happening was, I'm not going to mention which company I was working with, but they wanted, let's say, a hand painted feel or an effect, and but they didn't want to invest the amount of time it takes to get that kind of an effect. And we were trying to achieve it digitally, but they were not satisfied. They could still tell that it was digital, it had a certain element of that. And we tried to achieve it with AI, and it was not uh, happening. But then there comes a point where someone literally just brings a photograph to you and they go, I want this exact thing on this shirt, or I want this exact flower on this skirt. And that's when you take a massive hit because um, that is not something that you want to do. That is not something that you ethically align with. And it feels wrong doing that because that flower is someone else's work. How can I put that on my creation? So, how I navigated this personally, um, I went through a lot of copyright free sources, and having a bank of good copyright free sources is always going to help you out. And in times of, let's say, where urgency is going to take precedence over anything else, is going to take precedence over, let's say, creative output or the amount of involvement you can give to a given project. So in that case, I would suggest that you have a bank of open source, um, uh, like open source platforms ready to help you. And that is something that helped me a lot. And wherever I could get an opportunity, I generally use, even when I was using artworks, I would generally check for their licenses. I would check for intellectual property related concerns, and if it was an artwork in the public domain, I would use it, and I would make a minimum of 12 significant changes to the design so that it does not look like the original design entirely. You need to make at least 12 significant changes. A lot of photographs, like a lot of collage, like what helps a lot in such situations is going through or doing a deep dive into collage art or collage design, because that essentially is creating something new with something that has already been created or an image that has already been captured. So when you understand the ethics of that, that is something that profoundly helps navigate such waters, because I personally found it very compromising when I was asked to do that, as would anyone. Um, but yes, finding open source, finding copyright free sources is something that definitely helps me get my job done quicker, and it helps me come to it with a lot more integrity. And I give credits wherever I can and however often I can. And I do keep like a list of people whose work I've used or whose work has, I mean, yes, a list of people whose work I've used so that I could mention them in the credits. So yes, that's how I generally navigate that. But that is something, um, it takes time. Uh, it is context dependent, and learning how to navigate that is something that comes with practice. And it's not necessarily like the answer I gave is not necessarily going to be a template that you can follow in every situation. Sometimes you have to be a lot more, I mean, quicker, and sometimes you have to be a lot more tactful and whatnot. And yeah, I hope that at least gives some clarity in that direction. What do you think?
Um, from what I understood from the question, this is more about staying true to your ideas, right? And what you bring to the table. Um, as I mentioned, once you start working, I'm like you answered it in a very different space, and I think that
Right.
was a great space to explore. The space I'm talking about is a little different from that, but let's say I'm talking
Mhm.
about, okay, working with a team of people, um, and how do you like still stand your ground with your visions, that is. I think, um, as I mentioned earlier, when you start working, your storytelling skills become much better. They become better because you have to explain a lot of things to a lot of different people coming from a lot of different backgrounds. When I initially started working as like a creative marketer, and I would have to explain my ideas to the business team, my boss basically gave me this prerequisite thing wherein I have to bring this to the table before I present any sort of creative ideas. And that was some sort of data as well, or some research. I'm not like very hardcore research I'm talking about, but some research wherein you can back your idea up as to why your idea is feasible or why should we consider it, became a very important thing whenever we would have any sort of creative discussions. So I would have to also give a little bit of market research as to, okay, these are the things that are trending right now, or this is what is working, this is how this thing worked for this company. So I think, to stand your ground, include a bit of these technical information to present your
Right.
idea more strongly, so it doesn't just become about your creative expression, but it is also like, okay, this is what the market also says, and this is how my idea is kind of going together with what the market relates to or sees. So that is something that really helped me to kind of break through and reach people who are more technical and business oriented, because they
Hmm.
have to deal with numbers, and they have to kind of talk to people who deal with numbers. So
Right.
it's not like they are villains here, but they have to also think about it in their own sense. So I think this is
Hmm.
something that always helped me, and just being good with the storytelling. And I think because you would also have to connect with them on an emotional level at the same time. So make sure, because your ideas have that angle wherein they are able to kind of also connect, and it is not just a visually appealing thing, but there is an emotional ground to it, because that is again when your work is out there, when it strikes an emotional chord, that's when it really works out. So just having that plus this backing it up with a little bit of market research always helps, and that helps you stand your ground more firmly. And I would say, if you do this and if the team is still kind of going against your idea, you still have to stand your ground and be like, okay, this is what I firmly believe in. If everyone thinks ki we should go the other direction, of course, we are part of a team and I would go that direction, but I still believe that this is not the best thing to do, and I think you can leave it at that.